Thanks, Jules. And just thank you as well. Christmas is such an amazing season. And last year we were able to welcome thousands into our service across December. And we're looking forward to doing the same as we celebrate. As Bob said, that this is good news for everyone. As Jules mentioned, my name's Dan. I'm the vicar here. It's so good to see you all this morning as we start a little series in the lead up to December, looking at the book of Hebrews. I recently saw an article, the headline of which said that parents of 4 children are the most relaxed and the least stressed parents. And and obviously as a parent of 4 children, I felt pretty smug. I was like, yes, it's probably because I've learned so much along the way. And then I read the article and I was rebuked at 3 levels. The main point was that they are relaxed not because they know what they are doing, but because they've finally given up the illusion of control. Forget perfectionism. There's just about space for fed, watered, rough geolocation. That will do. The second way I was rebuked was that the reports actually said it was mums of 4 children. The dads didn't get a mention, apart from when it said that 50% of these mums said it was their partners that caused as much stress as their kids. So pride comes before a fall. But if you see me with my kids, it is that sort of that stress of you can't even like zonal mark them by yourself, let alone man mark them. And I think it's a little picture of our lives, really. Life gets complicated quite quickly. We will all have things that we're trying to keep hold of in our personal lives, in our work lives, in our spiritual lives. And often they're in tension with one another. To go after one means you struggle to hold on to the other. There are some things in our lives that we have to carry, and it's our job to carry them. There are other things that we could carry, and actually it's not our job to carry them, and we can't. There are others that sit in that blurry middle, challenges that, they pull on the heartstring, and you want to lean in, but you maybe don't have the ability or the capacity to do so. And it's in those moments that the complexity piles up, and it can be easy to feel overwhelmed. Now, it's not just in our own lives that this happens. We see this and experience this nationally. For us, we're in these strange times. We're sort of post-Brexit, post-COVID, possibly post-2-party political system. Things feel more uncertain and ambiguous than they have for a long time. And increasingly, there's this awareness as you talk to people that where we used to look for solutions, people are a little bit more cautious now. A friend of mine, I was chatting to them this week. They were saying they lead a church up in the north, where Kate's from, and they were at an event with all the churches in Manchester with Andy Burnham, the mayor there. And they asked him if there was one thing the church could do to bless Manchester, what would it be? And he replied, support for mental health. Because he says it doesn't matter how many people or how much money we release into this area, things are only getting worse. More and more people are realizing that we can't only have political solutions to every problem. And talking to many of you, those leading in schools or public services, the challenges that you're facing seem more complex, they're multi-layered than we've ever encountered before. Now, meanwhile, in the church, things seem to have shifted. The spiritual atmosphere in our nation is turning up. People seem more open to Jesus than, I don't know about you, than I've ever experienced in my life. We're seeing it here, but again, across the country. I was with a group of friends, leaders of churches across the nation this week, and we're hearing the same thing all over the place. Some of the one remarkable story. There's a guy who leads a church in Norwich. The church, the venue holds around 1,300 people. Christmas is so popular. This year they're holding 14 carol services. And it's free, but because it was so popular last year, they have to have a booking system so people can book tickets. And they opened it and they sold out in 40 minutes. Every ticket, 14 services, over 1,300 people at a service. You know, there is an openness, a hunger for something more that we've not seen. Here in Brighton, a few weeks ago, we were praying for an outreach in Stenning Grammar, one of our schools. There was a 3-day mission. And over those 3 days, we heard of 250 teenagers putting their trust in Jesus, making a decision to follow Jesus. That's over a tenth of the school going, we've seen something in Jesus that we've not found anywhere else. And they're going to follow that up with Youth Alpha to show people, give people the opportunity, these young kids, what it is to follow Jesus. Now, this is good news, but it will bring more complexity. It will bring more challenge, opportunity. You know, do you know what? Nearly all the challenges that we are facing as a church together at the moment are the challenges of growth, the challenges of opportunity, of working out how on earth do we respond to what God is already doing, let alone if he answers the prayers of what we're asking him to do. So the question in all of this is not just how do we survive in an increasingly complex world, but how do we thrive? Because that's the promise that Jesus has made to us. And to answer that question, we're going to turn for the next 3 weeks to a book of the Bible called the Letter to the Hebrews. It was written to early followers of Jesus, particularly those living in cities. And those cities, like ours, were pluralistic cultures. There were lots of different claims for where you would find life, where you would find truth. And to follow Jesus in that place meant to be marginalized and meant to be met with hostility. In other words, following Jesus meant life was going to become more complicated. And so the question that people were asking was this: if God is so committed to us, if God is so committed to our joy, if he loves us, then why is our life so complicated? Why are we facing these challenges? And the answer that this book gives in a nutshell is this: that life is a journey. And as you fix your eyes on Jesus, as you journey through the complexities of life, you will not only survive, but actually you will thrive. And so we're going to look at these opening words in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, to kick us off. This is what it says. In the past, God spoke to our ancestors through the prophets at many times in various ways. But in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he also made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory, the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. And so he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. Amen. To the original hearers of that letter, they would have been reminded of another thing. The writer here takes the opening and mirrors the opening of other popular stories of that day. It would kind of be like as if he'd started with a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It would have resonated something with us, a story about a hero. And the stories that would have come to mind were these stories about an unknown hero that was going to come and save the day. And the writer of Hebrews echoes this, but immediately goes, this hero is not unknown, it's Jesus. And here's who he is, and here's what he's going to do. Now, a few years ago, the research group Barna did a major global study asking the simple question, what helps us keep following Jesus? Especially when we're trying to follow him in a world that is taking us in a different direction. They titled this Being a Resilient Disciple. And what they discovered is there are 4 things really that make all the difference. That if you still want to be following Jesus in 10 years' time, if you not only want to survive, but you want to thrive in your faith, lean into these 4 things. And here they are on the screen, and they're quite simple. Firstly, these are people who trust Jesus personally. It's not just an idea, it's a relationship. They take the Bible seriously as a place where God is going to speak. They prioritize the corporate worship, the corporate mission of their church, and they let their faith shape their life. You know, how you show up to work, how you show up to your family. And not only are these things there, but it's not like pass, fail. These are growth mindsets. I'm somebody who wants to grow in my relationship with Jesus, want to grow in my trust in his word. And these are really helpful because they kind of just give you some like decision raisers to go, well, lean into this in my life. Or if you're a parent, lean into this in your kid's life. Put these things here and everything else flows out of it. And you see it in the book of Hebrews. The book of Hebrews, the focus really is on Jesus. And it says, fix your eyes on him. And as you look at him, you'll see what he's looked at. He's looking with love at his church. He's looking with love at this city. And he's looking with love at you. And over the next few weeks, next week, AY is going to look at Jesus' heart for this church. Melissa's then going to look at Jesus' love for this city. And then today, we're going to think about his love for you. Because the heartbeat of Hebrews is this: to fix your focus on Jesus, because he's fixed his focus on you. And the opening words say this: in the past, God spoke through our ancestors, through the prophets, at many times, in many ways. And what he's getting at is he's saying it's like the Old Testament was it's like we were being given an advanced sketch of who God is. And as you read the Old Testament, it's like, here's the outline of who God is. And some bits of him, we've got like a more detailed sketch of him. But there's other bits that are less detailed. A portrait is emerging bit by bit, but now, not only do we have the whole picture, actually the person the portrait is of has walked into the room. Jesus has shown up. And what we see is that there is nothing in the Old Testament that contradicts who Jesus is. It just wasn't yet the full picture, the whole picture. It's not like a dating app where you get the picture and the profile and then you turn up for the date. It's like a completely different person. It's nothing like that. It's more like, you know, when you hear about somebody who's good and then you meet them and you're like, they're even better. Like the description didn't do them justice. It's like that with Jesus. What he's saying here is the God we find in Jesus is the God that we are longing for. It says in these last days, he's spoken to us by his son. And in these last days, in other words, from now until the end of history, there's no clearer, truer expression of who God is than what you find in Jesus. Which, to be honest, is a pretty big claim, pretty bold claim, really. And to highlight how big a claim it is, the first part of this book writes about how Jesus is superior to angels. It says, so he became as much superior to the angels as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs. Which you might want to say, well, to be honest, that wasn't really a live issue for me this morning. When I first read that, I was like, oh, great, you've answered a question that I hadn't asked. And in doing so, you've raised 10 more questions that I never thought of before. Angels, like, what's this about? And there are two really things you kind of have to know, two background ideas. In the Jewish story, the angels were the messengers of the law. They were the ones who brought the law to the people of God. But the law isn't just the rules of what you should do or not do. The law is the whole story. The Torah is the story of where God's people came from. It's the story of where they're going, the story of how to live on the journey, and the promise that God will get them there. In other words, the law is life. And the angels, well, they're the Deliveroo guys. They're the guys who bring it. They bring it right to the door. They make sure that the right people get it. And Jesus says, Jesus is greater than the angels. And that might, and to be honest, that matters more than we might think. Because every culture has its law, a script for how you're going to find life, how to be in order, how to be happy, how to make it through, the script that you have for your life. But the strange thing is, the script that we are surrounded by, the modern Western secular script, is the first in history to say that actually the law is inside you. You know, don't look up, don't look around, look within. In other words, we are our own angels. The Western secular story that we are surrounded by, that we don't even really notice because it's so normal to us, it says that if you want to know who you are, look inside yourself. Follow your heart. You be you. Be true to yourself. And we take that for granted. But actually, it's really unusual. Do you know what? In every other culture in history, in every other non-Western culture around the world today, if you asked, where do I find my identity? They would not answer in this way. Actually, they would give you 7 other things. And Katie's going to help me with an immense number of slides. But if this is my life and I'm asking, who am I? Every other worldview would say, well, there's a future. This is an answer to where I am going. But it would also give you an origin, an answer to where I have come from. It would give you an ethic saying, well, what is good? And then inversely, if we know what's good, we need a way of dealing with our guilt when we don't get it right. It also would give an answer to where do I get my value? What am I worth? And it would give us a way of holding it all together to say this is how it is coherent. And possibly most importantly of all, it answers the question, who do I belong to? And it says you belong to these people outside of yourself, and then would define your duties and your responsibilities to those other people. And actually, when you look at that, what it forms is each one of those things adds a resilience to your life, because it says you can find an answer to that question, who am I? Your identity, where you get meaning and value and passion and purpose from more than just you. And it's actually a very resilient place that you can rest a lot of weight upon. But actually, our worldview that we grow up around answers those questions very differently. Actually, it answers every question with the answer, you. You know, who do you belong to? Well, yourself. So we'll get rid of everyone else because you belong to you. What holds all this together? Well, it's you. You are the one that this is on. How do you deal with guilt? Well, it's self-forgiveness. You redeem yourself. What's good? You decide. You know, it's strange, we are the first culture in history not to have shared categories of right and wrong. Maybe the closest we get is do no harm, but then even then we don't share all the same definition of harm. Where have you come from? Well, it's an accident, so there's nothing really to be found there. Where are you going? It's up to you. It's up to you. Just you'll find it in your life. And what am I worth? Well, you're worth whatever you produce. You are worth however you perform. Then because the secular worldview around us says the real you is within you, what you are left with is neither your past, your present, your future, not even your body tells you who you are. And the only resource you have is to look at how you feel now. It's identity without context, transcendence, or community. You hold yourself together. You belong only to yourself. In other words, we are told to build an identity on the most fragile thing possible, my current emotional state. And this is too much weight. You know, our emotions were never intended to carry the weight of our meaning and value and passion and purpose. And what this means is either we break under the pressure or we reduce our value. We reduce and shrink our vision. We diminish our hopes to something a lot smaller, and then even then it's too much to carry. To maybe lighten the mood a little, it's really a risky thing to do. An example might be this, that when we lived overseas, Kate and I discovered that health and safety is taken at different degrees in different cultures. And it wasn't really a thing in the country we were in. And I walked into work one day to see a contractor doing this. He had a wire to put up, and he obviously was in a hurry, so too busy for a ladder, and spotted a very sharp, pointy thing that he could stand on. And I sort of walked in, and I was like, in that moment of, I don't quite know what to do, really. Like, do I say something, or is that going to be the thing that causes the accident that I'm basically pretty sure is about to happen? And he managed to get the wire up and got down remarkably well. I was very surprised. But as you look at that picture and feel that, oh my goodness, this is going to go wrong, feel that feeling. That's the feeling that our Father feels when we try and carry the whole weight of our lives on our own. And he offers us so much more. He says, instead of fixing your focus on yourself, fix your focus on Jesus. Because this is who he is. And then in 2 short verses, he lists 7 things about Jesus that meet our 7 deepest needs of that answer these 7 questions. Where am I going? When you feel you have no future, Jesus claims you for himself because he is the appointed heir of all things. Doesn't matter how complex your life is, it's all headed towards him. When you're not sure where you come from and you feel lost, we're told he made the universe. You are not an accident. Your creation was not only purposeful, it was personal. What is good? We're told, well, here is goodness is. You don't have to work it out yourself. And not only do you know what goodness is, you have a source of goodness because the sun is the radiance of God's glory. What am I worth? You're told you don't need to work it out or perform it out. You don't have to define yourself. Jesus is the exact representation of God's being. You carry his image. Your worth isn't something you achieve, it's something you receive. When you feel that you have to hold it all together, we're told that Jesus sustains all things by his powerful word. All things includes you. And how do you deal with your guilt when you feel it? You don't have to redeem yourself. We're told after he provided purification for sins, he sat down because it was done. No more work left to do. Your forgiveness is a finished gift from him. And when you're not sure where or if you belong, Jesus names you as his own. We read that he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. You belong to the one who sat down at the right hand of God. And because he sits there as our representative, carrying everything that is to be human, our seat is secure. Your seat is secure. His acceptance is your acceptance. And there's a lot of promises in there. 7 different promises answering probably the 7 fears that we all have. And you might be thinking, well, how do I get in all of that? Do I need to memorize this? Can we turn it into a song maybe? And the answer is, well, you could memorize all of these. They'd be good to remember. But these aren't things you achieve. These are things that you receive as you get to know Jesus. These are things that you will experience as you become his friend. See, we're told that Jesus is the exact representation of his being. That word for representation is the word character there. What we've been told is that God isn't giving us a vague spirituality. He's not giving us a general inspiration, a pep talk. He's giving you himself. He is a person who can be known. And we're told that this is everything. He didn't hold anything back. This is the original bring your whole self to work initiative. Like, there is nothing that you need. There's nothing in him that you do not find in Jesus. And the way you get to know him is the way you get to know anyone else. You listen to them and you talk to them. It says that in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son. And God meets us through his words, the words that he spoke, the words that are recorded in the Bible, because he speaks to us through his words, because in doing so, he gives us both truth, but also grace. You know, sometimes people will say, well, you know, why Why is it that God doesn't just prove himself? Why can't he just write a big message in the sky, something dramatic so we would all believe? And really, underneath that question is really the question, why doesn't God just meet me on my own terms? And the answer is, he already has. The only way that God could meet you without crushing you, without removing your freedom, without removing your dignity, is to meet you in a way that creates space. And he does that through his speech. Because a voice is a voice you can listen to, or you can not listen to. When you read the Bible, God is speaking to you. When you press play on an audio Bible, God is speaking to you. He speaks. You can choose to listen. You can choose to not listen. You can choose to obey. You can choose to not to obey. This is a place of encounter where God is able to be who he is. He's a God who doesn't overwhelm us but creates space for you to be you because he loves you. He doesn't want robots. He doesn't want pets. He wants children. And so he speaks to us in a way that gives us space to come to him as we are. Now, there'll be moments when, I talked about this as, we've got all these tensions in life. How do we hold on to them or resolve them? And if you read the Bible, it will give you other tensions. You will experience other things. You're like, hang on, I don't quite get that. But we should expect it because that's what it is to be invited into a relationship. Relationships will have tensions. Relationships, to have a relationship with somebody, you will have to come up against who they are. And some people will say, well, surely I decide, what the bits are God and what bits aren't God. But actually, it doesn't really work because if God is never allowed to contradict you or tell you something that you don't want to hear, you're not dealing with the living God. You're dealing just with a projection of your preferences. That's not a relationship. That's not the God we get in Jesus. The God we get in Jesus is a God who will confront us, correct us, and comfort us, which, if I'm honest, is what I need. So what do you do with those tensions? Well, there's a few different ways to hold them, to resolve them. One is to ask, well, when you see a tension, what have I misunderstood? Sometimes we read something and it creates a tension because we've misunderstood what's saying. And that's why we don't just read the Bible by ourselves. We read the Bible with others. It's what we do in our connect groups through the week. We read the Bible. We listen to one another. The other question you can ask is, maybe is there more to understand? The Bible speaks of itself. There's often a larger context. For example, in the Old Testament, there are laws that are there to reduce harm. They're there to stop worse things happening. Now, when Jesus comes, he says those are good, but they're not the fullness of God's heart. Because God's vision for your life is not that you would just go through life doing as little harm as possible. That's not exactly compelling, is it? No, his vision for your life is that you would be somebody who brings heaven on earth wherever you are. There are also some things that are just too big for us to understand. A mystery, in other words. There are some things that the Bible just holds in tension. Things like, the sovereignty of God and our free will. The Bible teaches both. And in 2,000 years of Christians thinking about this and reading this, they haven't been able to find a way that resolves it without letting go of one and letting go of the other. And when you do that, when you let go of one or the other, our faith goes weird, people go weird, churches go weird. And you have to hold them in tension, in a mystery. And this is kind of the point. When we accept the Bible as God's word, it's not like the way we accept a software agreement. You download the app, scroll. I agree. Never think about it. Actually, when you accept the authority of the Bible, it's an invitation into a wrestle, to step into the tension. And when you wrestle with it, actually, you're showing that you trust him because you're trusting him enough to challenge him rather than ignore him and to be challenged by him. The opposite of faith isn't doubt. The opposite of faith is offense. Doubt led people into an encounter with Jesus. It's offense. It's the people who are offended that walk away from him. In the heart of our faith, Jacob, the father of the people of Israel, gets renamed Israel, which means the one who wrestles with God. Because the other option is to kind of just tap out, to say, well, Jesus, actually, I think you're wrong. And, that is a valid option. But when you think about it, he isn't asking you to do anything that you aren't already doing elsewhere in a riskier way. Like every area of our lives runs and is based on something that's often called first principles. These are the basic assumptions that you can't prove, but you can't live without. You get them in the sciences, in maths, it's things like 1 + 1 = 2. In geometry, it's, a point has position but no area. You can't prove these from anything underneath them. You just have to accept them. But without them, you can't do anything else. The sciences have these, but it's not just abstract things. We all operate on first principles. When you sat on your chair today, you probably didn't do a risk assessment. You just sat down. When you get paid, you trust that your employer will give the money to the bank will give the money to the shopkeeper will give you chocolate. We just trust. Chairs hold, money works, people generally stop at red lights. We just accept them, but if we didn't, you couldn't move forwards. The question isn't, do you want to live by a script, something foundational that has a step of faith in it? The question is, which script are you going to live from? And the choice is, you can either live on a script that is sustained by you, or you can live on a script that's sustained by Jesus. That's the force of the promise of that verse, that Jesus sustains all things by his powerful word. Let's make this a little bit tangible. Okay, I want you to imagine a note in your head. Like, think of a note in your head. Say it out loud, give it a hum. Yeah, go on, I know you haven't spoken for a little bit. Hum a little, yeah, pick a note. Okay, what we're gonna do is I'm gonna get us all to breathe. I'm embracing my inner Jacob Collier here, okay? I'm gonna get us all to breathe in, and then at the same moment, we're all gonna breathe out, and you're gonna sing that note. Not just hum, you're gonna sing it, and we're gonna see how far we can go. If you're asthmatic, you have your inhaler or sit it out. But or if you're flu, you're pardoned as well. But we're gonna see how long we can go. So no cheeky breaths, okay? So I'm gonna get us to breathe in, okay? 3, 4, and sing. Keep going, keep going. Go on, go louder, go on, keep going. That's a nice little clash going over here. Okay, keep going. Oh, I've got some singers over here looking fine. Yeah, somebody catch them. Caleb, don't fall over. Keep going. It's over here. I've got a men's choral club here. Dan's our winner. You can keep your breath going out for a bit, and then eventually you run out. Every one of us reaches our limit from what can come from within us. Now contrast it with Jesus. It says he sustains the universe. That means everything you see, everything that is unseen, galaxies, planets, atoms, human history, by his word, with a breath that never runs out. He never needs to inhale. He never reaches his limit, which means if he holds the universe together, he is more than enough to hold your life together. This means that the Bible is meant to function as a first principle in your life, not because you'll understand it all or you even like it all, but because this is the place where you no longer have to sustain yourself, but you can receive a sustenance that will keep you going forever. And you can trust him. Wherever you feel you can't, do you know what? You can. The clearest reason we're given here is that we're told that Jesus is the heir of all things. The beauty of Jesus being the heir of all things is that he doesn't just inherit the good bits. It's easy to imagine that when Jesus inherits our life, he does it how I sort of curate my social media profile. It's like, here's the achievement, here's the good moment, here's the tidy section I'm proud of. I'll inherit that, I'll own that. It's like we think that Jesus comes, he's like, right, Dan, okay, you're the vicar. of St. Peter's. They're a great bunch. I'll inherit that. That's good. The 2 of your kids, they're doing well at school. I'll inherit them. This one hasn't started school, so we'll put him in a holding pattern. We'll decide later. And actually, we'll put you in a holding pattern because we're not sure how you're going to do in quarter 4. We'll see how that works out. And this part of your life, don't want to know about that. I'll take the good stuff, but we'll leave the other stuff. I'll inherit that, but everything else, not so much. That's not how Jesus works. Yes, he inherits the joy, the blessings that we receive, the bits of your life that are going well. He claims that, but he also willingly inherits the parts of your life you wish weren't there. He's willing to inherit that relationship that's so complicated you can never imagine it being restored. He'll hold on to that. He's willing to inherit that part of your life that you struggle even to look at honestly, the area you avoid talking about. He's like, I'll hold on to that. He looks at that part of your future that you feel so uncertain, it creates a lot of anxiety. He says, I'll hold on to that. He doesn't just inherit the edited, curated, posted version of your life. He is willing to inherit every part of who you are. And the shocking promise of the book of Hebrews is the one who holds the universe together is not ashamed to hold you together. He holds what you can't hold. He carries what you cannot carry. And he looks at the pieces of your life and he says, that is mine. I will take responsibility for it. And to do so, took him to the cross. To hold on to us, to say, I love you, but also to hold on, to say to the truth that there is sin in you, took him to the cross. He can't look at me and say everything in me is fine. To do so would be to deny himself, be to deny me and my agency, would be to deny the dignity of those that I wrong. That's not who he is. God looks at our sin with utter honesty and says, I'm going to hold on to it and deal with it. But he also looks at us with utter love and says, I'm going to hold on to you. And as he holds on to both things, it takes him to the cross. But there's another reason to trust him, not just that he's willing to go that far, but that he didn't stay there. We read that after he provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. Jesus didn't stay dead. That's the hinge of everything. When Jesus stepped into the darkest parts of our humanity, our sin, our shame and death, he wasn't swallowed by it. He wasn't contaminated by it. He took it all into himself and then he walked out of the grave, leaving it behind. And that matters because it means that he not only claims every part of your life, he's not only able to carry every part of your life, he's able to cleanse every part of it too. We know that because he sat down at the right hand of the majesty in heaven. He sat down in the purest place, and he sat down there because the sin is gone, and he sat down there because the work is done. Jesus says, fix your eyes on me because I've fixed my eyes on you. I've done it all, and as you fix your focus on me, you find everything that you need and that you long for. Amen. Amen. Amen.